So good afternoon. My name is KathleenSmith. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Jamieson Cochrane. Jamieson, you had RSVP'd for another event that I run, and you had also suggested a guest that you'd like to invite. And when I looked at the guest's email address, I realized, oh, that's a company email address. I know someone who works there. So when I was emailing back to you, I said, I know so-and-so who works at that company. And then you replied, oh, well, I used to work there too. That was a large toy manufacturer. And can you tell me what your position was there?
Sure. I actually worked there in two spells. I worked initially as a production manager for the advertising and media production team. So we made our own commercials internally at that company. We had a creative team, and I managed all the projects. And that was my primary role. But as a secondary consideration, I started what I ironically called the fun committee. And I pulled people from various facets of the company and organized events and tried to enrich the employee experience of the company just as a sideline. It was something I decided to take on myself, and because I enjoy that. And when I left the company and I came back 6 or 7 months later, they invited me back in a role of culture ambassador. So rather than bring me back in my primary role, they decided to enhance the secondary role that I had created for myself.
Oh, good for you.
And that involved employee morale, employee advocacy, employee communications. It was sort of a grab bag of things that I created myself. I said, I feel like this is an opportunity for us to improve the employee experience or to improve employee understanding and engagement. And I would make a proposal, and then it was accepted. I worked closely with the leadership of that company on elements such as that.
Very exciting. So the first time you were there, you say you were production manager in advertising and promotion, digital media and media. Are you an artist yourself?
I'm not. My primary function was organizing and motivating and making sure that people were meeting deadlines, being the point person for all the other departments that used us as a resource, and also being the point person for all the external people that we would use for our productions. So I was more of an organizational force, but I liked to think of myself as, or some people would call me, the most creative organizer that they knew. So I wasn't core to my role, but I was there. I could provide input and the occasional idea that might get incorporated.
Okay. Did you learn how to make videos?
Yeah, I did a lot of scripting for mostly instructional videos. So how we would have a product and they would want a video explaining how to assemble it or how to use it. And so to me, that was a comfortable exercise in writing in my early days of writing material, because it was very clear cut and very instructional. So it felt like it was well within my purview of being an organizer, that I could explain step by step. And it didn't, I took some liberties with being creative within that, just having a little personality to try and make it a little more interesting.
Fun, yeah. And what were some of the fun things that you organized the first time you were there?
Like social activities, you mean?
Like what did you come up with?
I would organize, our two big tentpole events were the holiday party, which was for staff and a guest. And I tried to come up with really interesting places for that. Like we did the CN Tower a couple of times. We did a patio furniture showroom where the patio furniture remains there, but the guests can sit in whatever area they want. And then there's a big dance floor area. So that was a very unusual venue. And then we would have a summer party, which was outdoors. Toronto summers can be quite hot and sunny and pleasant. So you want to be outside as much as you can in the summer. And that was just for staff. So that was meant to be a bonding experience, a volleyball tournament, a barbecue, karaoke. It was always very much enjoyed. We would do that at the island or the CNE, someplace that gave us room to spread out a bit inside. Those are the two primary things.
Ideal for summer. Lovely. And you must have had some success with your turnout then.
Yeah, I would say the summer parties would have a turnout. Probably 90+% of our staff would come out and look forward to it. They had the day off work to attend that.
Oh.
The holiday party with guests was quite a large turnout as well. They became very popular events that people look forward to and talked about for a long time. And I would hire a photographer as well, so that rather than have our staff have to work taking pictures, I would hire an external photographer so everyone could enjoy themselves.
That's
and
a clever
have lots
idea.
of memories. Yeah.
Okay. How did you find that job in the first place?
It's an interesting story. I was working in television and quite enjoying it. I worked at a television station for over a decade, and that's a very fun place to work also. My foremost goal when I want to work somewhere is it going to be fun? A third of my day is going to be half of my waking day, but a third of my full day is going to be at this place. It should be something enjoyable. And so I was walking through downtown Toronto and I passed an office building, very large windows, and there were lots of toys in the window, and it almost looked like a toy store. And I thought, what's this? Didn't make sense in the location it was at. And so I looked further and I saw the name, and I remembered it and looked it up later. And it happened there was a story in Toronto Life, which is a local magazine, and it was a profile of this company and its founders. And it really captivated me. So I started watching for job opportunities with this company. And then one day something came up that seemed to align with my experiences and my interests. And going from television production to advertising production, I thought it's not such a great leap. And as it happens, they were happy to have me, and I made the transition to this company after that.
Congratulations. And you stayed there for quite a while.
My first run there was, I think, well, I know it was 6 years. In my career, I didn't realize this for some time, I would last about 6 years at a company or in a role and decide that I had really gained as much as I could from it, wasn't enjoying myself as much. And so I would give my notice and I would just take a leap into the unknown, and I would just take time off. And sometimes it was a month, sometimes it was 6 months. And somebody from my network would come to me and say, are you still taking a sabbatical? Are you interested in this opportunity? And that's how I ended up finding a couple of different things in my travels that appealed to me and were my next step. And that's what happened. In this case, when I left that company, they approached me with that new role, and I came back again for that second run.
So you enjoyed your sabbatical in between. Yeah.
Yes.
So then they invited you to return.
Yes, and that was another trope I found in my career, that when I have left, as I said, somebody in my network might come to me and say, here's an opportunity. Or what happened with the toy company, where they said, you were really good at this aspect, even though it wasn't part of your job, and we'd like you to come and create a role. Actually, the first role was a little bit created around my skill set as well. They had an opportunity, and when I went into to interview, I realized that they'd already hired for the role I thought I was applying to, and that person was interviewing me.
Oh.
So there was no role. And so I was quite relaxed in the interview after that, because I thought, well, there's no role. There's no need to be nervous in this situation. But what was happening was this person was filling out their team, and seeing my skill set said, here's an opportunity. And it was almost as though he was selling me on the idea of this job. So the table was sort of turned, and he was promoting the idea of me coming to this company, and here's what you could do. And so it was an interesting, unexpected situation, and worked out well because the role was created. again, I took things, I found opportunities that weren't being satisfied and incorporated them into my role. And so I've discovered over the course of my career that these opportunities can come up if people keep connections with your network, you prove yourself, you are industrious, and you're creative in terms of how many different things can you do and provide value. And then people in turn think of you when an opportunity comes up.
And did they give you a title with the job when you came back the second time?
When I came back the second time, my title initially was Culture Ambassador. And at the time, I thought that's the silliest title I've ever heard, but I embraced it because of its silliness. And I thought I want to have a business card that says Culture Ambassador for a toy company that I can hand to somebody when I'm meeting them professionally or at a party. And it was a good engagement to have that job title, and it was really fun.
So how long were you there as a cultural ambassador?
So in that role, I think I did that for about 3 years, and then we transitioned. It was more of a contract position, and then when it became a full-time position, we transitioned the role to Director of Internal Communications. So much of what I was doing was the same, but it became more structured. So I created more structure around it.
And they called you director.
Yes, and it was more of a global role as well, because this company by that time had offices, I think 25 offices around the world, and about 2,000 staff. The company had really blossomed. And so that was, and it also in so doing, I started pulling in other things, like there was nobody doing archives. So I started putting a mind to archiving and hiring an archivist. And that meant that when we, at the time we purchased a classic toy from another company. And so I was tasked with getting a small team together to go to their offices in the United States and plumb their archives. We were now the stewards of the archive of this classic toy brand. And so I wanted to make sure that this was our one opportunity to capture that archive and document it, and also provide information to the toy manufacturers in our own company to know the history of this product, what worked in innovation, what had not, and so collecting all that information as well. So it was a very wide-ranging role, lots of different things involved that you wouldn't necessarily have expected.
And so you were the director of communication. And how did you communicate internally?
We had a few methods. This is going back a while now for me, so I have to plumb my own archive. We had an internal communication tool. I would communicate by email. Every year I created a colorful poster with lots of little icons, lots of little infographic icons that showed what had been accomplished the year before by all the teams, as well as what we were anticipating in the next year. Our core values were front and center. Our pillars of growth were on this chart. So people proudly put it up on their cubicle or in their office, and they could refer, it was there for them to remember what we're all striving to achieve together at the company.
Neat. Yeah. And you designed that.
I worked with an external company to design it initially, and then I built on it year after year, and I got a little better at Illustrator and creating my own little icons. I also would put together communications when the company moved or when an office moved. I would put together a little booklet explaining, here's what's available in this new neighborhood you're moving to, in addition to here's how the building works. And that was also used for new employees once we were established in the new location. So I had lots of little things like that, change management, and just sometimes it can be overwhelming when you're joining a new company. I created a glossary of acronyms because the company loved acronyms, but it can be quite a barrier as a new employee, not knowing what people are talking about. It's like a foreign language. So I put together a comprehensive glossary of all these acronyms that the different teams use. Sometimes a team would use the same acronym as another team, but it meant something completely different.
Oh, great. Great. So eventually you decided you needed a change again.
Mhm. When I left that company, I was actually still quite happy, but somebody approached me, and a good friend of mine for many years had come to the company I'm at now, which I'm in the venue now, BATL, the BATL Axe Throwing, and said, "Would you like to join BATL?" And at the time, I said, "No, I'm very happy where I am. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. I'm working closely with our executive team. I get to travel a little bit to the different offices, and I get to that little creative part of me. I get to really flex that, and so I'm quite happy where I am. Thanks for thinking of me." And then over time, he said, "Well, I'm going to put together a job description with you in mind, and you can review it." And I said, "Oh, I'm happy to review it and pass it to a friend if I think it applies to them." I was very dismissive, and then. In my role at the previous company to this, I was seconded to an office in New York for 2 months and lived there. And while I was there, I got a taste for stepping out of my day-to-day, for one, but also it felt like more of a leadership position in terms of more explicitly a leadership position. And it gave me a sense of what it could be being in an executive position at a company, which I never thought I would want. So I thought, you know what, I think this is a great opportunity. This company is growing really quickly. They have a very vibrant culture. I think this makes sense. Even though I'm happy where I am, I think it makes sense to try this. And so I started the process of negotiating and understanding what the role would be. And it was another 5 months of back and forth talks and for them to be prepared for somebody to come in my role. So it was an interesting transition.
Transition to BATL.
To BATL, BATL Axe Throwing.
And what is your role at BATL? What do they call you?
So at BATL, I am Chief Talent and Culture Officer, and that encompasses pure play human resources, payroll, benefits, employee administration, keeping contracts and documents in order. But then the talent and the culture part of it, I created a performance review system. I created our core values. We had a sort of loose set, but it had never been codified. So that was my first task of building this groundwork of core values that I saw everything else building from that. And a big part of my job here is employee experience, employee motivation, development. So urging managers to think about succession planning, because not only does it mean that, you know, if you need to go on vacation, there's somebody who can step in, but it's making yourself more available to advance to another role as well. So very much keyed into thinking about what the experience of working at BATL will be for our staff in our office and in all of our venues across North America.
Are you involved in the hiring?
I am involved in hiring. It's primarily my responsibility and somebody on my team. So we have a really incredibly positive internal record of internal promotion, which I'm really happy about. Between 50 to 80%, depending on the type of role, are promoted from inside. There are some specialties, and sometimes there isn't anybody who's ready to move into a role, and so we go external. And I overhauled that system as well. I feel like we have a greater diversity of candidates now, because front and center we talk about our diversity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives, and we've made great strides in terms of being a really welcoming community to as many different types of people as possible. We welcome everybody to express their unique selves when they work here.
It enriches the environment when you do that.
Agreed. Imagine if you have one person and then everyone else is just like that person, how narrow that experience would be and how narrow the product would be and how narrow the experience for your guests would be. So now if we take that and extrapolate to many different types of people, you're opening the world so widely in terms of what people can come up with and all of your different experiences brought together. And you get such a richness, such a rich tapestry then that you can decide, well, it determines the culture of your company.
How big is the company?
It's hard to say right now because COVID really devastated us, and we're just now starting to recover from that and getting busier and rehiring a lot of people because we're getting busier. So right now we're about 250, and that is just under 20 at our head office, and then a general manager for each of our 18 locations, and then hourly staff at all of the locations and at our customer service department.
So there's 18 locations.
We have 9 in Canada and 9 in the US.
Wow. And what about in the Toronto area, the Greater Toronto area?
Greater Toronto area, we have 2 locations in Toronto proper.
Mm-hmm.
I am at the Portlands location, which is near Cherry Beach in the south end of Toronto, in southeast end of Toronto, and then at Toronto Stockyards near Peel and St. Clair. And then we have a location in Vaughan on Steeles Avenue, Hamilton, Pickering, I might be pointing in the wrong direction, Niagara Falls, and then also Ottawa and London. I think that's all of the Ontario locations. There are 8 in Ontario plus Calgary.
Wow, so really spread out.
Mm-hmm.
How do the staff get to know each other? Do they get to know each other at the other locations?
It's interesting because another layer of this company is the culture of the people who come here to participate, who don't work here, but are part of our league. And we have a really vibrant league community. They feel very connected to BATL. And so many of our staff are in league, and so they compete in tournaments across North America, both tournaments from BATL and tournaments from other organizations that we are or might not even be affiliated with. So they come to meet each other through those means. We also have an axe prom at the end of every season, and it's tied to our awards banquet and our big tournament, the International Axe Throwing Competition that happens every year. It's happening this June this year. We pushed it back due to COVID. So everybody is connected in that way. And I'm always surprised when I'm meeting somebody from London and they know somebody from Ottawa.
Because they were in the tournaments.
Because they met at a tournament or at some other axe throwing event.
Would you like to show us a little bit about BATL while you're seeing us how you're there?
Sure. I don't know how much I can show you here. This is an example of a lane. So we call each of these a lane, sort of like bowling, where you're throwing against somebody. You have a left and a right, just like in bowling. And there are lines painted on the floor showing you, just like in bowling, how far, where you need to stand to start, where the fault line is. We actually throw, I don't have one handy right now, but we actually throw hatchets. So, about the length of my arm. Okay. And then for tiebreakers and in certain tournaments, we throw larger full felling axes, what you would see, to chop down a tree. You wouldn't chop down a tree with a little hatchet. We have so many safety precautions. So a lot of people are concerned when they're thinking about axe throwing that it seems dangerous. And also the fact that we have a fully licensed bar, so they're concerned about people being drunk and throwing sharp objects. But I can assure people our number one foremost concern is safety. So we have many protocols that we've learned in our 15 years of existence in terms of distance and how to throw safely. You can't wear open-toed shoes, for example, in case you were to drop that on your foot or if it fell out of the target while you were standing there. And we monitor alcohol consumption very closely, just like you would at any other type of sporting facility where you're participating and you're consuming alcohol. We watch that very carefully. And all of our coaches are Smart Serve trained as well.
Yeah. So you have coaches. What's the role of a coach?
So a coach has a few different responsibilities in terms of explaining how to play, explaining all the safety rules, and also just being a really vibrant and exciting part of your experience at BATL. So we want to make sure that people leave here feeling like they were really, that they were engaged, that they had a really empowering time, that they stuck an axe in the target. And all of that comes from the coach. The coach is the personality of the event.
Okay. And so people need to have some sort of expertise in order to come and enjoy themselves then, is that it?
They don't. We teach them everything. So most people who walk through our doors have never done this before.
Really?
It's not, yeah, it's not really something that, you know, you learned in high school gym class, for example. So we work with the assumption that most people who come through our doors have never thrown an axe before. And so we take them through it from the stance, how to stand, how to move, how to get the most momentum, how your arm should work. Sometimes we have to untrain people. For example, somebody who's a baseball pitcher and they've got this sling action, and you can't do that with an axe. It's not going to land in the target. So you need to untrain the mind in terms of those, what we call bad habits, because they're not fruitful when it comes to axe throwing.
Okay. So it's kind of a cross between baseball and golf, or between bowling and golf.
I would call it a cross between bowling and darts, actually.
Okay.
Because you've got the aspect of throwing a projectile that's going to stick into a target.
Mm-hmm.
But like bowling, you have a movement to it because you take a few steps, and you have a certain follow through that's important. And the hand-eye coordination is also quite important. So you want to be looking at where you want your axe to go. Just like bowling, you need to be concentrating on where you want that ball to go.
So what age group do you think this would be suitable for?
It's really suitable for any age over 12. 12 is the youngest that legally, for insurance purposes, that we're allowed to have anybody throw. It's come down gradually over the years. It used to be 16 and 14, now it's 12. Okay. And then there's no upper limit at all. As long as you have enough upper body strength that you can throw the hatchet, then you're welcome to come and learn how to throw. It's also open to people of differing physical abilities. In terms of, if you're a wheelchair user, you can actually compete head to head against somebody who is not a wheelchair user, and there's no difference in terms of your possible adeptness at axling. That's
very interesting. It's a very unusual sport in that way.
I think so. We also don't differentiate by gender either. So there's no differentiation between any gender identity, with the exception that sometimes there'll be a specific tournament that focuses on women in axe throwing, for example.
Okay. So could somebody in a wheelchair throw an axe?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. We've also had customers who are blind, and we just need to work with them in terms of understanding distance and where they're aiming for, and that has proven quite possible as well.
That's interesting. Do you use any kind of a sonar or anything to help them guide their throw?
We don't have any tools like that here, but certainly if somebody had a tool like that for echolocation, we could incorporate it for them. You wouldn't be able to leave it there, because then you would hit it with the axe.
That's true. So in this facility, how big is it?
That's a good question. I don't know what the actual area is, but I'll say that there are, what I'm sitting on right now, these two targets side by side is what we call a half arena. So there are two more targets over there, and those 4 targets make up a full arena. And in this venue, we have 4 full arenas, and that's an average size for our venues. Our smallest venue is Niagara Falls, and it only has 8 targets. It has 2 arenas.
Okay.
And then Pickering is currently Pickering, Novi, Michigan, Calgary. They're all much larger. Novi, I think it might have 6 or 7 of these, so it's massive. It's almost double the size of this place, which feels quite large to me.
Wow. And then you said you have a bar, so do you have an area for meet and greet?
There's a lot of extraneous, so to speak, space here in terms of, we have tournaments here, so there's a lot of space for people to view. And sometimes people will stay after the fact and enjoy another beer or another cocktail or glass of wine or soft drink. Some of our venues, our Hamilton venue has a really cozy spot that they can see. It's a little bit elevated, so you can see the entire venue. You can watch other matches that are happening. So that's a fun aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here at this Portland's one in Cherry Beach, do you have like tables and chairs set up for people if they want to relax and talk?
We have a little bit of that. We have a lot of stools and high top tables. Each venue is a little different. Each venue has a little bit different to offer. Our Toronto Stockyards location also has a pool table, has a couple of arcade games. Our London venue has cornhole, where you throw beanbags into a wooden target with holes, sort of like a kid's beanbag game. But cornhole has become an entity of its own lately as well, with leagues and everything. We don't offer cornhole leagues, but it's just a secondary activity that people can enjoy. And that venue has a whole seating area. Our Scottsdale, Arizona is half of it kind of looks like a classic diner, and then the targets are on the other wall. So lots of opportunity to hang out and have fun for sure. Good.
I would just like to say to the audience who is with us and listening to us is that Jamieson is a member of Mensa and also a member of an organization called the Mentors, Entrepreneurs and Leaders Group. And you contributed to that because we had a competition to create the favicon or logo for that group. And you participated in that competition. And you have found other ways to be engaged with groups. So you're very social.
I was at the cottage for a year and a half, and it was sometimes quite isolating. During the winter time, there were very, very few people around. And so my husband and I would be there with our cats, and we got into a rhythm of television and having a fire in the fireplace. And I texted with friends a lot. Sometimes I would Zoom like this or have people come to visit, but it was not anywhere near the same as my social engagement previously.
Were you close to water at your cottage?
Yes, there's a lake or lakeside at the cottage. So in the winter that freezes over. It's almost unfrozen at this point, getting there. So you could walk on the lake, and it actually made some of my neighbors closer because I could just walk across the bay or the lake instead of going the long way around on the road.
Great fun. So in the summer, you could go out in a boat.
Yes. Yeah, we're boaters now. I'm learning to boat, and I'm learning to drive a car. I've never driven until the last 2 years. I've always had a learner's permit, and then just renewed it, but never bothered to learn. Living in downtown Toronto, it wasn't a necessity. But up there, it's you need a car to get anywhere.
You do, yeah.
If you need any groceries or anything like that, you need to be able to drive.
It sounds like a charmed life.
I think so. I'm really happy. I used to organize a birthday party for myself where I would invite a large group of friends, and we would go through. Toronto has an underground path system that's called PATH, yes. And it's to avoid being outside in the wintertime mostly, but it connects all the way from the lake all the way up to Dundas, if you know the city. And I created this, essentially a pub crawl, but in the path. So we meet. It used to be in the evenings, and then the last few times I did it, I started Saturday late morning, like 11:30, down at the harborfront, and then we would snake our way along a route that I created, and we would stop at 9 different bars or restaurants. We never went outside the whole time. My birthday's in March, so it's not very pleasant weather in Toronto in March. That was my inspiration. And I created a passport and a path map and path bingo. And you had to get your passport signed at each location. At its peak, we would often have maybe 40 people. And so we would descend upon a location. Sometimes I'd warn them in advance. Sometimes we would just surprise them. And we would have one drink. Some bars would provide us with food just for sustenance because we seemed like a fun, happy group, and we needed some chicken wings, for example. And then it would take us about 12 hours to go from one end to the other. And everybody had pins with their names on it. They had, the passports were personalized. And then you had achievements along the way. So you would, if you finished your bingo card, you get a button for that. At each location, you get a button for that. So by the end, you're covered in all of these buttons of all of your achievements of the day. And so that was great fun. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
Being a host for 12 hours is exhausting, let alone the exercise of walking that distance over the course of 12 hours. But that's the type of thing that I like to organize and enjoy. So I think that happened, might have done that 9 times now. Started in my 30s.
Excellent. A great example of how you can put all your skills together. Well, Jamieson, thank you very much for talking to me today.
It was lovely to have a conversation with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Real pleasure. Real pleasure.